One night, in the streets of Seoul, two guys were harassing a girl. She screamed for help, begging the people around her, but no one stepped in. Another girl, Champa, witnessed everything with her own eyes. But when the police asked her to identify the attackers, she refused, even though they were the same guys who had brutally beaten the girl. Due to a lack of evidence, they were set free. The victim's father was devastated. Seeing the culprits walking free, he begged Champa to speak up, but she was cold-hearted and didn't want to get involved in unnecessary trouble. Later, those same guys blocked her car and started messing with her. One of them smirked and said, "If you open your mouth, you'll end up just like her." Shaken, Champa drove straight back to the bank where she worked. She had promised an elderly woman a loan, but when she checked the woman's financial records, she saw that the lady had no house, no job, nothing. "I'm sorry, but the best I can offer is a $20 loan," Champa said firmly. The old woman was heartbroken. She pleaded desperately, but Champa showed no sympathy. Champa's colleague, Chimki, couldn't bear to see the woman in distress. She spoke to the manager and got the loan approved. When Champa found out, she was furious. She pulled Chimki aside to a quiet spot and lashed out. "Are you close to the manager? Or maybe you're close to all the men in the bank?" she sneered. "Be careful in this finance world. There are limits, and you shouldn't cross them." Saying this, she stormed off to the bathroom. As she washed her hands, regret started creeping in. She immediately texted Chimki, apologizing and even offering to buy her a drink that evening. Just then, through the crack in the bathroom door, she saw Chimki standing outside. Champa smiled when she received a reply from her. "I didn't take your words to heart at all." But that wasn't the truth. To get her revenge, Chimki locked Champa inside the bathroom and walked away. Champa struggled to open the door and ended up falling to the ground. Furious, she stormed into the office and slapped Chimki in front of everyone. But then, something unexpected happened. Another woman in the office, the janitor, was wearing the exact same sandals as Chimki. It didn't take long for Champa to realize she had messed up again. The janitor must have accidentally jammed the mop against the bathroom door, trapping her inside. Because of this mistake, the manager suspended her for a week. Champa had always been cold and distant, so she had no real friends. After just one day at home, she was already bored out of her mind. But there was one person who kept calling her, exactly 17 times a day. Finally, Champa decided to visit her. She lived on Moodoo Island. Champa had spent her childhood there in her grandfather's house, and the girl calling her was none other than her childhood best friend Titli. The excitement on Titli's face was obvious. She was thrilled to see Champa after 10 long years. Moodoo Island was home to only a handful of people, mostly farmers who lived off the land. When the locals saw Champa after so many years, they didn't recognize her. She had changed completely. Titli introduced her to her husband Bablu and her brother-in-law, Dablu. Champa had known them since they were kids, but now they had changed. She was about to find out how. Standing ahead of them was someone even tougher, Titli's mother-in-law, Phumati. And she was the grumpiest woman on the island. The moment she saw Champa, she didn't even hesitate before saying, "Why are you even here on vacation? There's nothing on this island." Champa could feel it. The same bitterness she had left behind in her childhood still lingered in the air. Then there was Titli's daughter, Tara, a 10-year-old girl. Titli wanted to give her a good education, but on this island it was nearly impossible. Anyway, as Champa looked around the house, she was surprised to see how clean it was. Titli smiled and said, "It took me 3 whole days to clean this place up." Hearing that, Champa hugged her and thanked her. Titli then went to the kitchen to grab something to eat. By the time she came back, Champa had already fallen into a deep sleep. Titli gently placed a pillow under her head, a small gesture that proved just how much she still cared for her childhood best friend. At night, we see Titli's whole family sitting together having dinner. Suddenly, Bablu says, "I'm taking Tara fishing tonight." When Titli refuses, he snaps at her. After they leave, her brother Dablu enters Titli's room and violates her. This wasn't new for him. It was a daily thing. If Titli ever tried to resist, Bablu would make sure she paid for it. He never tolerated a word against his family. But wasn't Titli a part of his family too? She didn't know who to turn to for help. Maybe she had pinned her hopes on her childhood friend, Champa. That's why she called her 17 times a day. But Champa never talked to her properly, always making excuses about being busy and hanging up. However, when she heard Champa was coming to visit, a small hope flickered inside her. But so far, she hadn't told her anything. Meanwhile, Dablu found Champa alone in a quiet spot. He handed her a leaf, definitely not an ordinary one. Around here, people used it as a drug. His intentions were far from good. Just when things were about to take a dark turn, Tara arrived. Furious, Dablu spat at her and stormed off. Champa had barely escaped that night. After that, she spent the whole day playing tapchi with Tara, enjoying her time. On the other hand, Titli was extracting honey while her husband sat back, watching like a king. They ran a beekeeping business, and the honey was supposed to be picked up by a boat the next day. Titli often thought, what if I just hit on that boat and escaped to Seoul? That would be perfect. And she had a solid reason to think that way. Boats only came here once or twice a week. Champa was leaving on the honey boat the next morning, which meant this was Titli's last chance to tell her everything. She finally spoke up. 15 years ago, you promised to take me with you to Seoul. Champa had made that promise, but now she hesitated, making excuses. Maybe next time, she said. Left with no choice, Titli finally told her the truth about Bablu. But what they didn't realize was an old woman had been listening to everything. Titli always lived in fear that something bad might happen to her daughter. But when she voiced her concerns, Champa lashed out at her. She couldn't believe that Titli would lie just to go to Seoul. Before Champa could say more, Titli had already left. The next morning, before leaving, Champa met Tara to find out the truth. Just then, Tara's grandmother barged in, and with her was the same old woman who had overheard Titli's conversation the night before. That meant they knew everything, but didn't want Champa to find out. So they quickly sent Tara home. And that's when we learned something shocking. Tara wasn't actually Bablu's real daughter. Meanwhile, Bablu was deep asleep, completely unaware of what was happening. Titli quietly sat next to him, slipped a bundle of cash from his pocket, and took the keys to his safe. She thought it would be filled with gold and jewelry, but inside there was just a phone. Titli arranged a boat to escape to Seoul and waited for the right moment. Then, grabbing her daughter, she made a run for it. But as they reached the shore, the boat arrived. And that's when she realized the boatman was one of Bablu's men. Titli was caught. Bablu dragged her and her daughter back home. The woman who had helped them was taken away by DW. When Tara tried to intervene, that monster didn't even spare her. Broken and helpless, Titli finally told her story. There wasn't a single man on this island who hadn't violated her. She had no idea who Tara's father was. Bablu wasn't her husband. He had just given her shelter. And that's why she was always scared that the same thing might happen to her daughter. And in the end, her worst fear came true. The people on the island just stood and watched as Bablu took Tara's life. What kind of injustice was this? Men were cruel. But how could women be so heartless? Titli sat there for hours, crying her heart out. To cover up the crime, Bablu himself called the police. The entire island testified that it was an accident. Finally, the officer turned to Champa and asked what she had seen. "I was asleep," she replied. And just like that, with a little bribery, the case was closed. Champa was supposed to leave today, but she missed the boat because she was running late. That meant she had to wait another day or two. Meanwhile, Titli was devastated over her daughter's death, completely drained. So DW took food to Champa, soup made from those intoxicating leaves. After eating, she passed out, and that's when DW showed his true colors. Just then, Titli stormed in. But this wasn't a coincidence. She might have been weak, but she had been watching DW closely. She warned him, stay away from Champa or she'd settle things with a stick. Titli stood her ground, refusing to back down. In the end, DW had no choice but to run. It was just like old times when Titli stood up for Champa as a child, protecting her, fighting off bullies. The next day, the boat was supposed to come for the honey shipment. But instead of working, Titli was in the yard, digging a grave. A while later, DW and Bablu left for the city with the honey. And that's when Titli unleashed her fury. Everyone who had lied in her daughter's case, she started killing them one by one. In a matter of seconds, 2 women were dead. Seeing this, Kamalawati panicked and ran. But she didn't get far. Titli didn't spare her either. Later, Fulmati returned to the fields and was horrified by what she saw. With no one to protect her, hiding was her only option. Her sons were in Seoul. Titli was hunting her down, searching every house, every field. But she was nowhere to be found. That's when someone spotted her, crouched in the fields, trembling, clutching a sickle in fear. Meanwhile, Champa was ready to leave. But when she tried calling the boatman, there was no signal. She went to check. Someone had cut the tower cables. That's when Fulmati grabbed her. But she was too terrified to even explain what was happening. Her body was shaking, her voice stuttering. And then, Titli appeared from behind. She slapped Champa hard across the face. Fulmati took off running. But how far could she really go? She ran and ran, until there was nowhere left to run. One side was death, the other, a deep ravine. She tried to scare Champa, waving her sickle in the air, spinning it around, pulling off tricks. But even her weapon failed her. Just then, her sons returned from the city. Seeing them, her face lit up with joy, and she jumped into the water. She hit the rocks below, and just like that, it was over. From there, Titli went to W and took him down just as cleverly. Champa had already seen it happen. Seeing Titli coming her way, she ran for her life. After running some distance, she spotted Babu and Sintu, the boatman. They were drinking water when they saw W hanging from a tree, and their faces turned pale. Titli, like a lioness, moved silently, ready to pounce on them. But just then, Champa shouted to warn them. Titli lunged at them, but this time she failed. And Babu managed to grab her. Before he could finish her off, Champa tried to stop him. And Babu gripped her wrist tightly and smirked. After dealing with Titli, I'll make you my new wife. Saying this, he went to get his axe. Titli's hands were tied, but she clenched a knife between her teeth and drove it straight into Babu's stomach. He collapsed and died on the spot. Seeing Titli drenched in blood, Champa grabbed Sintu and ran. In their panic, they hopped onto the boat, but forgot to untie it from the dock. By then, Titli had already reached the shore. Sintu quickly untied the boat, but he couldn't save himself. Champa had no choice but to escape alone. Hours later, a call came into the ferry service office at Seoul's dock. The call was from Mudu Island. Someone wanted to book a ferry. A staff member took a boat and headed there. It was Titli. She had made the call to get to Seoul, but she had no clue about the place. The moment she reached the shore, she was arrested. Meanwhile, Champa was dreaming of a better future. Just then, we learned that when Babu was beating up Titli and her daughter, Champa had been watching from afar. But later, when the police questioned her, she lied and said she had been asleep at that time. When she saw Titli in jail, her mind went blank. Titli had been locked up in the same prison where Champa was held. Somehow, Champa managed to escape downstairs, but what she saw there left her frozen. Titli had already taken down the corrupt cop. The next second, she picked up a hammer and charged at Champa. Champa barely dodged and rushed to the door, only to realize Titli had already locked it. Finally, she realized that if she wanted to survive, she had to fight. She picked up the cop's baton and smashed it on Titli's head, but it didn't even faze her. After taking so many hits, she had become numb to the pain. The next moment, both of them were trying to strangle each other. Meanwhile, Champa unlocked the jail door and quickly locked herself inside. But that didn't help much either, because Titli had already found another key in the cop's pocket. Just as she started unlocking the door, the cop suddenly shot her. He was still alive. Stumbling, Titli moved toward him and finished him off with a hammer. Then she unlocked the jail door to kill Champa, but this time she failed. In the end, Champa finished her off. This incident changed her completely. She realized her mistake and identified the two real culprits. She told the police that they were the ones who had killed the girl. Back home, she started reading all the letters. Every letter began with, "Dear Champa, I miss you so much. You're the only one who can help me." Champa knew she should have read those letters long ago. But now, what was the point of regretting when it was too late?